Did you know that you are really just a little human popcorn kernel waiting to quantum leap at the next level? Welcome back to Universal Laws with Kristy Sturdivant. Today, we are diving into the law of vibration because it's May and it's time for that. So, when I first started podcasting about 3 years ago or something, my very first podcast ever was this one called The Law of Vibration and Popcorn. With my very first podcast, I was very nervous. It's probably over edited, but it's some metaphor or analogy or whatever you want to call it that has always stuck with me and resonated with me because it's all about quantum leaping. And so I'm going to rehash it today and give you a little bit of a story where I had like a major quantum leap happen. And then this month we are going to map out ways for you to raise your own vibration so that you can slowly build it up over time and start having these quantum leap moments for yourself. Okay, so back when I recorded this podcast, I was doing science experiments with my boys. And one of the ones that we came across was some kind of information about popcorn or something. We were really into popcorn at this point. We were watching a lot of movies, and popcorn was like a really fun, easy snack. And I looked at the science behind popcorn, and it was something that I had not known. And it turns out that each popcorn kernel contains like a small drop of water or less than a drop of water. And what happens is when you apply heat to this popcorn kernel, the water molecules start vibrating really, 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 really fast. And then all of a sudden it explodes and it turns into something else. The popcorn shifts identities, which is exactly what we're trying to do when we are quantum leaping, if you like that term. Some people don't really like it, but that's exactly what it is, right? It's manifesting. It's manifesting at that very, very quick pace of like, oh, something happened, and boom, I'm a completely new person. And I always thought it was a really good way to describe this process because that's really what manifestation is. It is changing your frequency at a cellular level so that it vibrates really quickly. And then if it vibrates quickly enough, then poof, you turn into a little popcorn kernel. Now, this is not something that happens all the time unless you are just vibrating at a very high state all the time, which could definitely happen. There's nothing to say that that cannot happen, but it's not a super, super common thing. Oftentimes in our lives, we find ourselves in these really high vibrational states for whatever reason, and poof, it shifts our identity. And so maybe that vibrational state is a very excited, happy, ecstatic vibrational state, and something comes in that we want, or it could, also be vibrating at a normal state and something pops up that you kind of have to shift into and changes your identity. This is what it is. You can call it quantum leaping, you can call it identity shifting, whatever you want to call it. Okay, but that's basically how the law of vibration works. Is we are all made up of all these molecules, and when we are aligning with our mind, our mental aspect, our body, and then our soul or our ethereal state, if you will, it all combines it can shift us in very dramatic ways. Okay, so that is the law of vibration and a popcorn kernel, or a nutshell, whatever you want to say. Now, there was a incident that happened, maybe 2 or 3 years ago that really, for me, kind of solidified this concept of shifting identities and quantum leaping into new realities that has just always stuck with me. I'm going to share it with you today so that you can kind of look at it as this place on a map where it's like, okay, this is what happened. This is something that perhaps I have experienced at some point in my life, and now I kind of want to go back and explore and see what else I brought in. Okay, so story time. I have always been a geek. I love Dungeons and Dragons. I love the concept of board games, and I've never really played role-playing games in my life. It's just not something that I was ever raised with, but I always loved games. And there's always been a part of me that's like, someday I want to learn how to play Dungeons and Dragons. And I had never really had the opportunity until I took my kids out to find friends to play Pokemon cards. And when I did that, I met this person who has become my friend and started up a conversation. My kids were playing with her kid, and I was like, oh, Dungeons and Dragons. We were at like a Dungeons and Dragons type store that was also like a place where you could play board games, like a board game cafe. And I said, oh, I really wanted to play that. And she said, oh, well, we've been playing as a family for years, and I played before that. I can teach you. And I said, oh my goodness, please teach us. So she was kind enough, her and her son were kind enough to teach me and my boys how to play Dungeons and Dragons, which was a very, very fun thing. Well, at the same store, a couple months later, they were like, oh, we're going to start running this kids camp again. That's great. We were talking to the owner, this woman and I, and he was like, oh, would you want to have an adult camp too? And we were like, yes, totally want to have an adult camp. So he was nice enough to find a dungeon master for us, and he was able to get another couple of people together, and we had this adult D&D camp on Saturdays, which was so much fun and something that I had not ever intentionally put any manifestation energy towards, but it was something that kind of was always in the background that I always wanted to do. So fantastic. So the very first morning as I was driving out, it was on a Saturday morning, it was going to be like 6 hours at this place. The very first morning I was going to this camp, I was just vibrating at like such a high level. Like I could just like feel every cell in my body just light up with excitement. And it was so high energy and so magical. I wonder if my car was vibrating with me as I was driving to this session. And along the way, I heard my favorite song, which I kind of think of as my theme song. It was Queen's Don't Stop Me Now. It's such a high vibe song. It gets me really excited. It makes me feel like I can do anything. So I drove there. I was jamming to Queen, as one does, went in, had like the most fun time. It was so fun doing this. It was the first day of like 4 weeks. I came home and I was still like riding this high, but I was like really, really tired too, because it takes a lot to vibrate at that kind of level, which is why we don't really, as humans, quantum leap that often, because it takes a lot of effort to just be that excited or filled with that kind of emotion for in a long period of time. So I come home that afternoon and I'm just still riding high, super, super happy. And I walk in to the house and my husband says, I have a surprise for you. And I said, oh, okay, what is it? Okay, so a little bit of backstory. When I was 16 years old, maybe 15 years old, because that's when you could work back when you were 15 years old, I worked at a Dollar House theater back in Kansas. If you are not familiar with what a Dollar House is, a Dollar House theaters were where you could go and see movies on the big screen in a theater, movies that had already like done their big run at a major theater. It would go to a Dollar House before it eventually went to VHS. But the Dollar Houses were, they would play these top run movies that had already done their time in the big theater, and you could still see them on the big screen before you could, wait a couple months, because you usually had to wait like 6 months to a year back in the day. This was pre-streaming. And so I worked in this Dollar House theater, and it was my very first job. And it's one of those core memories that you usually have when you have your first job, where you can kind of remember everything. I can remember the smell of the popcorn. I can remember the layout of the theater. And one of the things that is like cemented in my head is there was like a small arcade over in the corner of the theater, trying to get people to kind of play games in between, make a little extra money. I have no recollection at all of what the actual arcade games were, but there was a Stargate pinball machine. Stargate was a very popular movie. This is back when they would make pinball machines based on films, and so there was this Stargate pinball machine from the early 90s, and pinball machines, if you are unfamiliar with them, they have like what are called call-outs, and so you will be very, very quiet, not doing anything. And all of a sudden, the pinball machine will call out to you and say, hey, shoot. Well, the Stargate pinball machine would say, shoot the pyramid, because it was kind of an ancient Egyptian set. And so I have this very real recollection of the Stargate machine over in the corner calling out to me randomly throughout, serving popcorn, tearing tickets or whatnot. And when I first met my husband and, when we were dating, I remember very soon after, he proposed to me and we were talking about our life as one does. He said to me, he's like, what are a couple of things that you want out of life that, you want to experience, you want to do, or you want to have? And I was like early 20s. I had nothing. I still can't do this just because of like how I'm designed in my human design. I can't really like pinpoint certain things. And so I was like, oh, I want to, go out of the country, and I want to do something else. I can't even remember. And then I said, oh, and I want a Stargate pinball machine. And he's like, what? I said, yeah, Stargate pinball machine. It was the pinball machine at my first job. I think it'd be really cool to have a pinball machine, and that's what I want. And then I completely forgot about it. So, unbeknownst to me, for the last 20 years of our marriage, he has been low-key looking for a Stargate pinball machine for me. And we have never really lived in a place where that was a feasible option, just because we moved around a lot and everything. And when we finally landed in our current house, we had a spot for pinball machines. And so I come home from this amazing Dungeons and Dragons session with my friend, first time playing a real campaign, vibrating at a really, really high level. And he says, hey, guess what? I found your Stargate pinball machine. I was like, what? And I knew instantly. I was like, oh my gosh. I was vibrating at such a ridiculously high level that this manifestation that I put out there over 20 years ago finally came into our realm in like the perfect way that only the universe can do. It came in and landed on this exact day. And not only was it like my Stargate pinball machine, it was in really, really good condition. It was really nice. It's Stargate is like, there's like a whole history behind the pinball machine, but there's some really janky ones out there. But this one was like in really good condition, and it was local. It was like 10 minutes from our house, and it was a really, really good deal because the people who owned it just wanted to get rid of it. And so he's like, we're going to go pick it up tomorrow. And I was like, what? It was like, this day is going to live in my memory probably until like on my deathbed, where I'm like, oh my gosh, I had that one amazing quantum leap day. And it seems silly, right? Because I didn't manifest something that was like a mansion or a yacht or anything. It was just like this culmination of energy that I had been building up, manifested in these like really cool experiences and really interesting things that I had put out into the universe so long ago that it kind of completely forgot about it. And so this is what happens when you are vibrating at a high level, at a cellular level, okay? It shifts things within you. And I truly, truly believe that everybody has experienced this at some point in their lives, but they have just like chalked it up to like, oh my gosh, that was just super, super lucky, or that was just fate or destiny or whatever, or maybe they missed it completely because they were just like so excited that they didn't even connect those dots. So this is what a quantum leap, an identity shift, a manifestation that has been in the works for 20 years can look like when you are vibrating at a high level and when you're paying attention to what's going on around you, okay? And so I had three little dots on my map. I had my song, my theme song. I think it's a really good idea to have a theme song in your life that has really good words, that has a really good beat to it, that really makes you excited. I had a very new thing that I was manifesting. Then I had a very old thing, but it all came together in this really cool and awesome experience that like has made this day live on for me in a huge, huge way. And so look back as we're exploring this law of vibration this month. I want you to kind of think back to a time in your life where you have been, it's more fun to do this when you're excited, okay? And you're bringing in something really good. Think about those times when you have had this like cellular excitement where you're just like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. I can hardly stand still. I'm literally bouncing around the house. It's insane. It might not have been recent because I don't think a lot of adults let themselves experience this kind of like exuberant joy. I think kids do it a lot. My kids are really good manifestors and I think all kids are really good manifestors because they let themselves and they let their emotions just take charge of their bodies and then they just explode all the time. So think back to a time when this has happened for you and hold on to that feeling, because when we are manifesting, we are creating our life. It's all about feelings, okay? You can't really manifest from mental state. We like to think that it is. You have to be able to, not get dragged down mentally. And then there is some aspect about doing affirmations that can help raise your vibration. And you can do that physically too, like having a really strong, healthy body and all that. Like that's definitely also part of it. But your emotions are like your core manifesting, like uber powerful mitochondria. So that is the feelings are where it's at. So think back into your life when you have had like really high, excited feelings and maybe do a little exploration about what you pulled in around that time. Or maybe if you can get into that state of super high experience feelings in some way, track that too. Okay, I think there's a lot of ways that as adults, we kind of tamp down our feelings and we don't allow ourselves to experience those high vibe emotions. But there are probably more opportunities in your life than you would think. So this is what we're going to explore this month, is mapping out our manifestations based on our emotional vibrational state. It's going to be so much fun, and I can't wait to explore it with you.